fun. Love it. So I'm glad to see everybody networking and sharing ideas. This is really awesome. So as you can tell, I am not Dr. Lamac Morris. I'm Dr. Kimberly Peterson. I do work for Beringer Ingelheim Animal Health, and our company is the one that makes HeartGuard and NexGuard, PureVax kitty vaccines, and the Recomatech dog vaccines. And so next session, I think, I'll be talking about some vaccine protocols with you. So Dr. Morris wasn't able to get here, and so Thursday night he texted me and said, Kimberly, will you please give my presentation? So I have to apologize that the only way he could get the presentation to me was on the PDF and not a PowerPoint, so the navigation is going to be a little challenging. So I have a place where I'm going to have to skip some slides and I'll have to do it manually. So just bear with me. And then if I get stuck on a slide and maybe don't tell the same story he might tell, just hang with me, okay? So we are going to talk about why animals get sick and how we can affect the outcome in our shelter facilities. So when we're thinking about how to manage infectious diseases and, more importantly, the prevention of infectious diseases, or at least the reduction of infectious diseases, we're thinking in three main categories. We're going to think about the germs themselves, how they behave, and what consequences they cause. So pathogen is a term that tends to spill out of my mouth fairly frequently. And so that equates to a germ. Sometimes I'll call it an infectious disease or an infectious organism. So I want to make sure that that terminology that comes out of my mouth is equal. Okay. And then we'll look at some processes that we can do to control the transmission of diseases in the shelter facility itself. And then we'll look at how we can affect disease occurrence and disease transmission in the animals themselves. Sound good? Basically, infectious diseases have some common denominators. So we know in our animal populations that we have reservoir animals, or animals that are harboring infectious diseases that don't appear sick. And so they may be leaving pathogens or infectious organisms around the environment for either us to move around or for other animals to pick up. And we don't know that they have the disease. Those are big challenges for us, aren't they? Because those are the animals that are then introducing the pathogen or the infectious agent into the susceptible animals that are either already in our facility or are coming into the facility. And so we're going to go through basically the only 5 ways that diseases can be moved around the facility or move from one animal to another. There's only 5 ways. So if we can get control of those concepts, I think we're done for the day, right? This is our mission. So the only way diseases can be moved around are by these 5 methods. So aerosolization, I think we all have a really good handle on that because we've been trained really well. When we cough, we're covering, not with our hand anymore. So we know that when we cough or sneeze, we're spewing out whatever germs might be in our respiratory tract. And so the dogs and the cats are doing the same thing, in addition to the dogs that are barking. And so those techniques that Dr. Spangler was talking about to calm the dogs in the kennel, if we can reduce the barking, which also spews organisms out into the environment, we can affect or reduce the incidence of aerosol transmission. So barking, coughing, sneezing. I don't know that kitty cat meowing is going to spew organisms, but maybe if they're really intense about it, that might do so. Everybody feel good about aerosol transmission? Okay. So one more point on that is that not only are the infectious organisms then suspended in this respiratory secretions, they can be suspended in the air, but they're also going to be settling on walls, kennel gates, maybe the floor out into the alleyway. And so then those organisms are picked up by other animals or us traveling through the environment. Okay? Direct contact is another method of transmission, and I think we all have a pretty good handle on that. That's the nose-to-nose contact, dog to dog, cat to cat. It can also happen through allo grooming, which we talked about earlier, where cats are grooming each other, or like puppies that have parvovirus. That virus gets on their fur or on their feet, and so other animals that just walk up to them and touch noses or touch fur can pick up the organisms that way. Fomite transmission is basically our responsibility. So we are the ones that are picking up infectious organisms and moving them around either on our bodies or on the equipment that we're using. So one example that I have just had in my mind for my entire career was Dr. Pantaleone talked about hospital-based infections. Well, in the vet school that I went to, Colorado State University, don't ask me how I got here to Kentucky, but that's why I don't have the cool Kentucky accent. We had a Klebsiella hospital-based infection in the vet school, and our infectious disease director was trying to figure out where it was coming from, and so they went around with a team and cultured all the cages and the sanitation equipment, and they cultured our stethoscopes and our hands and under our fingernails, and they found that we were spreading the organism around on our thermometers. So we were wiping them off with alcohol, but it wasn't enough. And so we instituted a whole new infectious disease management protocol in the hospital to try to dampen down that infection. So just thinking about the equipment that you're using in your shelter facilities and what equipment is moving around, with a person from ward to ward or from cage to cage. So those are the kind of things that we want to think about as far as equipment. And then what can we do ourselves to reduce our role in moving diseases around? Wash our hands, wash our hands, wash our hands, right? So that is the most powerful tool that we have in our facilities. If we can wash our hands between handling every patient or between moving ward to ward, we can have a huge impact on reducing our role in moving infections around.
Does hand sanitizer count?
Hand sanitizer, look, I've got another point on that coming up, so we might talk about it more than once. Hand sanitizer is a much better option than no option. So it's an alcohol base, and it does a really good job of removing bacteria and some of the more susceptible viruses, but it doesn't do a good job killing the more hardy and tough viruses or the ringworm spores or the Clostridium difficile spores. It doesn't get those more hardy organisms, but way better than nothing. So I think an option might be hand sanitizer and gloves might be a good option if you don't have, sink and soap and water available readily. So how many of you in the room work off of a truck, animal control truck? Okay. So, unless you've got one of the cool units that has the little sink in it, then the hand sanitizer and gloves might be a good option. All right, oral transmission. This is like one of the primary ways that our puppies are picking up the, parvovirus is a good example. So anything, other organisms like leptospirosis that lives in a water supply, or giardia. So drinking contaminated water, eating contaminated food. We know that parvovirus is really hardy in the environment, and so a dog might go out and eat grass or, pick up debris out in the yard that's carrying the virus. So that's an example of oral transmission. And then vectors, insects. So the most classic example of vector transmission is the black-legged tick transmitting Lyme disease, right? So we all know that Lyme disease in people can be a really devastating disease, and so it gets a lot of attention. And ticks also transmit Lyme disease to dogs, and so we have these, vector-borne methods of transmission. We know also like mosquitoes are responsible for transmitting some of the encephalitis viruses to people, or Zika, or heartworm disease. So those are examples of vector transmission. So we've got ticks, fleas, mosquitoes. The other, which are, because they're feeding on animals or people, or transmitting the diseases. Animals like, or insects like flies that might land on a pile of parvo feces and pick up the virus and then move it to another dog's food dish. That's, even though that's insect is involved in that, that's more of this like fomite transmission. So it's more of a passive transfer around the environment. Any questions there? Make sense? All right, so because of understanding those methods of transmission, we know that it's not required for animals to have face-to-face or nose-to-nose contact to have diseases transmitted between them. And we know that reservoirs or animals that are not sick but are leaving these infectious diseases around our facilities are a big threat to the animals coming in that don't have good immunity to those diseases. All right, here's a little quiz. So I love this iconic Norman Rockwell picture. I used to have this posted in my vet hospital because I just love looking at it. So let's pretend that this is your shelter's animal intake area. And this little puppy is sick. And so which one of these diseases would you be most concerned about? Parvo, yep. So we got that one down. So what makes the threat of transmission less with Lyme disease? Because it's a vector transmitted tick-borne disease. And why are we worried about parvovirus if the puppy is just sitting there like so? Yeah, so what is that puppy touched? I think Dr. Morris may have meant this to say oral transmission. I can't think of a situation.
What about fomite?
Definitely fomite.
Because the young man is obviously touched the doorknob.
Oh, very good. Yeah, so we want to follow you around your facility. Yeah.
Oh, I know where it goes. They're just challenge getting it off.
Yeah, light switches, doorknobs, tabletops. This chair on his shoes. So yes. So you all are thinking. Awesome. So let's think about some of the conditions that help promote the transmission of infectious diseases. So think about 70,000 people in a football stadium. And why don't all these people get sick if they come in and they're spending 2 hours watching a football game?
Not sure.
Good.
Healthy immune system.
So they are crowded, right? Yeah. So when people come in for an entertainment event, they're usually socially happy. They might be stressed by their neighbor, but they know they're going to get away in a few hours, right? They're usually nutritionally pretty in good shape. They might have a cold, but they're not in the environment long enough to give it to the 1,000 people around them. And then the bathroom conditions. There's bathrooms and there's sinks to wash hands, and so this setup, even though they're all packed in there, it's sustainable for the course of the football game. What would happen if these people were stuck in here for 2 weeks? Yeah, oh my gosh. Things go downhill pretty quickly. So now what happens to the stress? They're not sleeping. They're irritated by their neighbors. So their social stress is way up. What happens to those bathrooms in 2 weeks? Yep, going downhill. And then, these people are stuck together. They're not able to, come together like dogs would in a dog park and then go home. So can you see why some of these conditions might affect our shelter facilities? So how can we take advantage of the conditions in our facility that can address these 5 methods of disease transmission? So dealing with aerosol transmission, the way our ventilation systems are set up can play a huge role, and we'll look at some examples for that. Keeping distance between animals, or barriers between aerosol transmission. So if a dog is coughing or barking, what's the circumference of that dog spit? It's going out into the environment. So if we can give the animals room to get away from each other, then that might help aerosol transmission also. Direct contact can really be affected by traffic flow. How are animals moved around in the facility? So do they have an opportunity to touch noses in cages as you're walking them out to the play yard, or are there several animals in a kennel where they don't have an opportunity to get away from each other? And then remember this: wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands. So that is the #1 way that we can play a role in reducing disease transmission. And then cleaning and sanitation, also super helpful, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Oral transmission, if we can keep solid waste cleaned up, then that's going to go a long way to reducing disease transmission. So cleaning up the play yard after every turnout is going to keep the organisms from building up into those common areas. And then insect control. So does anybody use like the insect sticky traps to kind of monitor what bugs are coming into your facility? So I used to work in a facility that was USD regulated, and so we had amazingly intense protocols to follow. But one of the simplest things that we had was just a little piece of sticky paper that we put in each one of the wards to see what bugs were coming in. So, were we seeing ticks, or were we accumulating fleas or ants, or sometimes flies would get stuck on them. spiders. And so it just gave us a survey of what insects might be playing a role in the fomite or vector transmission of diseases. So Dr. Morris's expertise is in this biological risk management. And so he's spent his entire career developing protocols and consulting with different facilities. So I hope I can come even a fraction close to imparting the knowledge that he has. But the overall goal of this concept of biological risk management or control of infectious diseases is to manage the exposure in the shelter population, and then to minimize the spread when we get pathogens in the shelter. So here's some areas that I'm going to challenge you to take back to your facilities and check in on Monday morning to see how you can make an impact on what's going on in your facility. So you'll see sometimes these little notes, these are just places for you to kind of check in and see if there's something that can be affected. And then I've got this series of like real world examples of facilities that actually Dr. Morris inspected and got pictures. And so, these are real life situations, and we can explore how we can improve functions in these. So to start off with, make a list of where are the hand washing stations in your facility. So when you go back on Monday, you can just confirm that everything is set up to make this process easy for your whole staff. So do you have sinks and soap and towels in the kennel, isolation rooms, treatment rooms, reception areas, on the truck? So in this animal ward, these animal care workers were doing a really good job keeping things organized and clean, right? But there's no sink in this room. And so how are they going to manage animal care when they have, the majority of these cages full? So what could we implement that would be a solution? Would it be practical for them to clean this cage, go out into wherever their sink is, wash their hands, come back in? So what else could we do?
Gloves and sanitizer.
Gloves and sanitizer, right? I think that is a better option than doing nothing. The other role that I think that we can affect, reduce the incidence of fomite transmission is dealing with all the clutter situations in our facilities. So jot down the maybe 3 areas in your facility that you see as a clutter problem. And let's see when we go back on Monday if we can have an effect there. So if you have work areas like this, if somebody is responsible for cleaning this area on a daily basis, how are they going to do? So if it were most of the people that like volunteers, or like I work a lot with students. I'm going to pick on the students now, sorry guys. These are undergraduate students, by the way, not graduate students. So most of the students I worked with at the beginning of, when they first got into school, they would take the paper towels and the spray like we asked them to, and they'd spray, and they would like wipe this, oops, they might wipe this, maybe wipe this, but they would never move all that stuff. to clean it. And so if we can reduce the amount of clutter that are barriers to people taking care of their cleaning, disinfection, and sanitation jobs, we're going to do a better job. And so this is an area where somebody's working in the cat ward and they come in to type in their notes or get supplies. Somebody else is working in the dog ward and they're coming back to this central place. And so this is the ideal situation to be mixing around infectious diseases and moving them around. So, anybody have a counter that looks like this? Yeah. My kitchen counter looks like that. No. This is another situation that we might be able to affect. So how we can kind of get the idea, this is an area of pretty high traffic flow. How easy is it going to be to mop this floor? Yeah, not much. So how many people have a situation of donations like this? Yeah, it's pretty common. Our generous community wants to bring in supplies for us to use in our shelter facilities, and so managing those donations can be quite the challenge. So what would be a solution to this? Shelves, yes. Getting the food up off the floor, being able to catalog it into when it's going to expire. So like if we have the shortest dated food up here ready to dump into the barrels, and the food that's got the longest expiration date down here, then we might have a better chance of kind of keeping that flow going. If we can get it up on pallets or shelves, we make the cleaning easier, and we are also going to reduce the chance of insects or rodents breaking into the food and contaminating it, right? So this would be an ideal place to put those sticky insect traps. Once we get them off on the shelf, get it off the floor, stick the insect traps or maybe a rodent trap under there, and let's monitor and see if we've got a risk of contamination that way. So let's move to the ventilation area. This was a situation where the airflow in this ward is, moving front to back like this, and they were having a disease outbreak, upper respiratory disease in these cats, and Dr. Morris went through and found that, so the hand washing in the supply station is to the front of the room, and so they had put the sick cats at the front of the room so it was closer to sanitation and supplies. And so what's happening? Yeah. So the ventilation is pulling the aerosolized infection right down through all the healthy cats. So what could we do? Say that again? Relocate, right. So now they're stuck with this facility. They can't rebuild anything. So could they move the cats to the back? The sick cats to the back? Right, sounds good. So when you go back on Monday, take a look at that. Figure out where the airflow is in your facility and see if things are set up to take advantage of reducing aerosol transmission. So I love this example because I have seen this more than once, a situation like this. So this is a traffic flow problem in this facility. This animal care worker is mixing up vaccine, and this dog has just come in the entry door back here. This is an animal control officer, just took this dog off the truck. So it walked in, it's getting its vaccines. That's exactly what we want. Vaccinate as soon as they hit the facility, right? Vaccinate on intake immediately. fantastic, and we love it. But this is also their isolation ward. Yeah. So even though these animals are getting vaccinated right on intake, they're walking right by all the animals that are that are sick. Not ideal, right? So if this was your facility, what could you do?
Change your isolation ward.
Either change the isolation ward or maybe figure out a different entry point for the incoming animals, right? I'd rather bring them in through the reception area maybe and vaccinate them.
Vaccinate
Yeah.
on the trailer.
Even better, vaccinate on the truck. That's an awesome solution. And
Just because they're vaccinated, they're not gonna protect them immediately.
no, it doesn't, but we'll talk about that. So her comment was just because they're vaccinated on intake doesn't mean they're protected immediately. We'll explore that more in my next session on vaccinations. Okay, here's another traffic flow challenge. They had their scale, so every single animal comes in, gets on the scale. The challenge is that it is located in this area that's got some clutter accumulating around the edges, and it's kind of hard to clean. And then what do you guys think about, even though they got the disposable pad on top, what do you think about the carpet? So if this was you, what would you do? Move the carpet off. What would we replace it with so the animals aren't afraid of getting on the scale? We could use a yoga mat or a rubber mat or those vinyl mats that companies like mine make for the low stress handling. So I think there's lots of options. I'm not opposed to the disposable pad. Let's just move the carpet, and if we can't move the scale, maybe we could decrease some of the surrounding clutter and make it easier to clean. All right, can you picture your facilities in your mind and think about some forgotten areas? So in my life dealing with USDA inspectors, I couldn't believe how often they found dirty air vents. So I thought, okay, it's the intake or the vents where the air is coming into the room. We were paying good attention to those. I kind of forgot about the vents that were going out of the room, and the dust accumulates in more places than I thought. So I challenge you to go back and look at your air vents on Monday, okay? See what's going on there. How about under the kennel banks? Oh my gosh. When I was in practice, my kennel banks were not on wheels. And once I realized that there were wheels for those kennel banks, that we put them on wheels, and oh my gosh, it changed everybody's life. So, but trying to get under those if they're not movable is an absolute nightmare. So anybody have that challenge? Yeah. So I saw one facility that then built barriers so that liquids and dirt couldn't then flow under them where they couldn't be reached. So I thought that was pretty clever. I have seen problems with things like cage card holders that sit there for a month or 2 months or 6 months and never get taken off and cleaned. Anybody have that? Yeah. So if they're hard to get off and they're hard to clean, they're not going to get cleaned. And so then they accumulate the aerosol organisms, right? So the barking dogs and the coughing and sneezing. And then the staff handles that and moves on to another cage. High traffic areas, sometimes we forget, even if they're outside, they might be areas that need to be cleaned and sanitized too. Does anybody have this going on their facility? Yeah. Yeah. So in the facility that I worked in, this was a problem because our laundry room was pretty small, and We had one washer and dryer, and we had a lot of laundry trying to enrich the animals' comfort, right? De-stress, mitigate noise, all the other reasons that we go through tons of laundry. So, which one's clean and which one's dirty? So, if you have a volunteer that comes in and is trying to navigate through getting bedding for a cage, can you see where the trouble is, right? So if there's only one person that's managing this, they might know what's clean or dirty. So what would you suggest for a facility like this? Organize it. So who is going to take that job? It'd be a great one to assign to a volunteer, right? It's super satisfying to walk out of a room that's all beautifully organized. So I think there's a high satisfaction job right there. What else could we do to separate clean and dirty laundry? Label it. They could maybe have bigger baskets or put them in bags or some other method where it's clear what's clean and what's dirty. Anybody need to solve this problem on Monday? So here's another laundry issue, but what about this one? Are these cages clean or dirty? Does anybody have the situation where these carriers are coming into the facility and they're getting stored and maybe not clean? Wow, we did, yeah. So setting up protocols to not store these until they're sanitized. And so that if a volunteer or a new staff member comes in and grabs one of these, that it's clear whether it's clean or dirty. I'm so glad that this was never our surgical facility. Anybody's surgery room or prep look like this? Yeah. So what do you think this person's job satisfaction is? Yeah. So here again, we don't know what's clean or dirty. What could we do in this room to help this person? Kick his butt. Yeah, right. Okay. So servant leadership, right? We're gonna ask him where his barriers are. Like, why does he feel stuck with this? Could you even put tape or paint on the floor that says clean and dirty? Something as simple as that. So create zones, but we need his feedback to know where the problem lies, right? If he's not trained well enough, then okay. But we might discover a lot just by asking him what's wrong. So do you have areas that need help?
First, your typical feedback would be, well, nobody told me.
Exactly. So if nobody told that man, what to do, then lean on your shelter directors to make those instructions clear. So let's get clear written protocols that even a total newbie could come in and take that checklist and go do a good job. That's a really good job for administrators, right? All right, any questions about pathogens, germs, or how they get moved around your facility? Yes?
I wondered about our trucks, and I know they never, ever clean those trucks.
Okay. Yeah.
So, I mean, the stressful job, of course, you need to bring the dogs back in, and then they're not going to have time to clean them. Do Clorox wipes have any, are they good enough
Yeah, absolutely.
to wipe out at least?
So, any kind of cleaning and sanitation is better than nothing. And so if they have, Clorox wipes or a spray bottle and paper towels, do they ever get hosed out at the end of the day or anything like that? Okay. Never. And so how do we have suggestions on how they could improve the cleanliness of their trucks? Anybody have a good protocol in place to
Our
share?
facility lets take their tanks around back, into the brush and the soap, so here you go. They don't leave our facility till they have cleaned them.
So who cleans them?
They do, but they
Yep.
clean them at our facility.
Okay,
We're a nonprofit, so we don't employ the animal control officers, they just bring the animals to us.
okay,
So we supply the soap and the spray and everything for them, they just have to pull around back and spray the drugs.
okay. So in her situation, she runs they have the shelter, and then the animal control officers don't work for the shelter, they work for the county. So, and when they bring animals to the shelter facility, then the shelter provides the sanitation equipment for the animal control officers to clean their truck before they depart. Does that sound good? Okay, all right. So how did you get agreement that the animal control officers would do that?
Because I'm a really scary fighter.
She is a really scary fight for the cause woman. Awesome, okay.
All of
So,
my animal control officers are men, and I'm like, don't bring any more animals to those trucks that are clean because you just kill animals.
all right, so,
And they didn't like that answer, so.
okay, good. So,
Do they clean the little lasso thing that they get the dogs with?
yeah, can we at least spray it, you know?
I know and then they take that lasso thing and they stick it in the dog kennel.
Yeah.
Area.
So those are all things to be thinking about to incorporate into these disease control processes, right? So we can see and hear, we're hearing about all the gaps that exist. And so if we can just do the best job that we're capable of doing, that's the best we can do. So are we going to eliminate infections in our facilities? No. So our goal is to just reduce the severity of the diseases that the animals bring in or come down with, get affected with. So if we can improve the overall health of the animals by the processes that we implement, I think that's our goal. Huh?
Last time you cleaned wood,
Oh, nope.
I mean,
Yeah.
what is the best way if that's what they have? How do you
So
clean wood?
can you varnish it,
Yeah.
seal it,
Sure.
and then you can use disinfectants on it.
They have drop boxes out front, so it's just wood, so.
Yeah.
uh,
Those are good questions. So, in our USDA facilities, wood was not allowed. Yeah. All right, so we went through the pathogen section. Let's talk a little bit about the environment. So the World Health Organization had a technical bulletin that said for every dollar that we spend on sanitation, we are getting a $7 to $9 benefit and reduced expenditures on diseases. So World Health Organization thinks that it's a worthy cause that's also going to help preserve our resources. So good sanitation practices, what's our best one? Wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands. Are definitely going to have a big impact on disease risk. So take a look at your facilities. If you know what sanitation equipment you have right now, go ahead and jot it down. And then on Monday, go and take a look at it and make sure that it's in good working order and that the people that are using it are comfortable using it and know how to use it. In my kennel situation, we had a mop bucket that the wheels had rusted. And so nobody was taking the mop bucket down to the end of the ward because it was really hard to roll down there. So my solution was WD-40. It was so easy. I didn't have to buy a new mop bucket for, those things are like $120, aren't they, or something like that? So, easy solution to something that the animal care workers were really struggling with. Anybody use these we used those a lot before we got those, automatic sprayers. And they stop working on occasion. And so we want to make sure that the people that are using them will report to you if they need a new one, right? Or it needs to be repaired. Let's talk a little bit about disinfectants, which might get back to the hand sanitizer issue a little bit. When we're choosing a disinfectant, we want to be thinking about what kind of organisms we're trying to kill. So they come in, we've put them in order here, the ones that are easy to kill down to the kind of organisms that are hard to kill. And so some disinfectants are good at taking care of these. So this would be like the hand sanitizer area. And then these are getting harder and harder to kill. So when we're talking about the reasons why disinfectants might fail, it would be using the wrong disinfectant, I'll get to there, for the type of organism that might be in the environment, right? Under or over dilution. So if you'll go back and look at the disinfectant that is being used in your facility now, if you'll look on the label, it should give you clear instructions on what the proper dilution is to be the most effective. So if we're not putting enough disinfectant in the water, then we're not killing the organisms we think we are. If we're putting too much disinfectant in the water, then we can end up with like a corrosive material or one that's a respiratory irritant to the animals or to the people. Disinfectants cannot penetrate organic debris. So if a disinfectant, it doesn't matter what kind, comes in contact with feces or blood, the disinfectant gets inactivated, and so it can't clean whatever's underneath. So super important for the animal caretakers to clean before they disinfect. Okay? Remove all the dirt, all the feces, any snot or slobber has to be out of the way, and then disinfect. It's important too then to saturate the surface that you're trying to disinfect, and so you can't just go put a little light mist out of a spray bottle on a parvo puppy's cage. We have to make sure and put a good coating of the disinfectant on the surface. And temperature and humidity, those should also be on the label to indicate the best conditions to clean. So like an example of this would be, you couldn't take one of those pump sprayers into an outdoor run in the winter in Minnesota and expect it to do its job. And then contact time. This is also going to be on the label of whatever disinfectant you're using. And so I know the one that we used in our facility was 10-minute contact time. And so how do we know that the animal workers are adhering to that? It's easy to get in a hurry and try to rinse out a kennel before it's ready. So what kind of, are there timers available? Are they setting their phone alarm or whatever it takes to make sure that the contact time is appropriate? So when you go back, would you check? Does anybody know what disinfectant they're using right now? Awesome. What? Rescue. Good. Provet Logic. Vircon. Good. Vircon and bleach, I heard.
Bleach and Simple Green.
Simple Green. So you can hear just in this room, people are using many, many different things. And so there's no one set of directions. So if you're in charge of this sanitation job, or even if you're training staff or volunteers to do it, I challenge you to go back and read the directions, so to make sure that that everybody's getting trained properly on that. And are there measuring tools available so that they're, if they're having to hand mix, they're getting it right. So one thing I love about the ProVet logic, that's what we used, is the automatic dispensers. It made it so simple. I'm not going to read this, so come on. I do have a couple copies of this if you all, I've got like 15 copies if somebody really wants it, but I'll tell you what it is in a second. But this is available at the Center for Food Security and Public Health. So the Center for Food Security and Public Health. So just type that into your search engine, and it comes up with a whole website of tools. It's got this chart, which is all the types of disinfectants, and then all the types of pathogens. So here, bacteria, to viruses, to bacteria with spores. Okay, so easy to kill, hard to kill, and then all the types of disinfectants. So, and it'll tell you, yes, it works on this, no, it doesn't work on this. They also have a Disinfection 101 presentation, so that if you want to take a look, and maybe that's available if you want to train staff with it. So the Center for Food Security and Public Health. Okay. I think I already said this. Okay, so this was talking about the dilutions, where if we get it too weak, it doesn't work, and if we get it too strong, it's corrosive and also leads to respiratory irritation. For bleach, which is sodium hypochlorite, the dilution for the job that we want it to do to kill parvovirus and the bacteria is 1 part bleach to 32 parts of water. So that's a half a cup of bleach into a gallon of water. So anybody use that? Somebody's using bleach, right? So do you mix it like this?
I don't know.
You don't? Okay.
So,
So, yeah, so if you mix it to this 1 to 32 dilution, you really can't smell the chlorine in it. So it seems like it's really mild, but it's the perfect dilution to do the job that we want it to do. And so if you're using bleach to clean things, then this is, we're not stirring up all this respiratory irritation. Okay. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about envelope and non-envelope viruses. Let's see. Yeah, I've got it coming up. I'll come back to that. Okay. So I'm going to skip this because I don't know what Dr. Morris was going to say about it. So basically, things to think about when you're using disinfection. Clean up the organic debris. So clean before you disinfect. Be aware of what kind of diseases you're trying to get rid of so that you're picking the correct disinfectant, and do the right dilution. One more thing to add to this is also on the label, see how often the solution needs to be changed for it to be effective. So if you've got a spray bottle that's been mixed up and it's been sitting on the shelf for a month, it's not working. So ProVet logic, I think it says 24 hours.
I'll have to check that.
Yeah.
I thought it was a week.
Yeah, so let's check and see what it is. So your cleaning staff might need to be changing the solution, especially in those spray bottles or in those pump sprayers, a lot more often than they think. Okay, so a teeny bit about envelope and non-envelope viruses. So the The non-enveloped viruses are super hardy and tough in the environment. And so those are the ones that we really need to make sure that our disinfectants are going to attack. So if it says parvovirus, that it kills parvovirus on the label, we're good, okay? So enveloped viruses have a little fatty lipid coating on them, and that fatty coating is very susceptible to disinfectants. So super easy to kill those. The non-enveloped viruses that don't have that fatty coating on them are super tough. And so viruses like canine parvovirus, feline panleukopenia, feline calicivirus, and also canine hepatitis virus, the adenovirus. Those are all non-enveloped viruses, and they survive a long time in the environment under some pretty harsh conditions. So just check your disinfectants and make sure that it either says non-enveloped viruses, or you go back to that big chart from the Food Safety and Public Health website and check and make sure you're covering what you think you are. Are these the right disinfectants? So we talked a little bit about hand sanitizer, and they're not good at killing non-enveloped viruses. And so if that's all you're relying on, you might, have breakthroughs in diseases. So if you're going to use hand sanitizer, double it with gloves. Make sense? Correct mixing and frequent changing of disinfectants is also helpful. So the best method of hand washing for us is the mechanical removal of the organisms and debris on our hands. So just regular soap. It doesn't have to be disinfectant soap. It doesn't have to be hand sanitizer. And then, does anybody sing the happy birthday song when they're washing their hands? Yeah, good. Establishing cleaning protocols is, here's some other forgotten equipment. So this cart travels from ward to ward, and so who's responsible for cleaning that? The person that's responsible for cleaning this area might have some challenges. So we can reach out and engage them to help us solve some of these problems. Rooms that aren't used very often, we want to make sure to include that in our cleaning protocols. And then our really heavily used areas, we might need to clean them more often than we think we do. Anybody have this situation going on? I have never had this in my facilities, but I have seen it in veterinary hospitals, and it just makes me want to throw up. So this is, somebody was using this reusable cloth to clean in a ward, and then they weren't changing the water in between. So what risk do we have here?
But it's
Oh my
bleach
God.
water, it cleans everything. So why isn't that okay?
I know. So whatever organic debris is going in here is inactivating the disinfectant, and then these reusable cloths are just dragging pathogens from one cage to the next. Hate that. Okay. I am out of time, so I want to make sure you guys get your breaks. If this was a clean bowl just out of the dishwasher, would this be okay? Might be, yeah. But this woman had just picked this this bowl up out of the dog's kennel, and then came back in and was scooping water up in it. So is that okay? So just little things like that might be going on in your facilities, and it doesn't cost much money to stop something like that. The next section on the host and animal section is the vaccine protocols and shelters, and I'm talking about that next session. So anybody have questions on the germ movement or disinfectant?
I just want to ask you about the Sandy 512,
Okay.
which is from Provet Logic.
Okay,
And it's you wash the dish and then you dip it in the solution,
okay.
which is supposedly the dish is clean, and then you don't rinse it. You just set it down and it's supposed to disinfect. Have you had any experience with that?
I have not had direct experience with that product, but I have ones like it,
Okay.
yes. And
So they're effective? And-
yes.
Okay.
Because, you know, if your facility doesn't have a, you know, a high temperature sanitizing type dishwasher, then those chemical disinfectants are appropriate.
Okay.
So what do you recommend to clean on your everyday kennels?
In the everyday kennels?
Yes, everyday kennels, when they're coming into clean, what product do you recommend?
So the products that I have personal experience with that I liked the best were the Provet Logic and bleach. So, you know, the bleach you have to be super careful with because people get irritated by it, and definitely so do animals. And so we never used bleach in a ward where animals were living. You know, we'd move them all out either into the play yard or move them into another holding area, clean, let it all dry, and then put them back. So,
A lot of the lectures I've been to last year, they talked about Clorox. Once you dilute it, it's only good for 4 hours.
that's probably true.
Yeah, I don't know
Yeah,
how common knowledge that is. 'Cause
yeah.
I've been playing around with Clorox my whole life, and I didn't know that.
Yeah,
until a
so
year ago.
hopefully it says it on the label. And if it doesn't, that Center for Food Safety and Public Health, it'll have it on there. Y'all have been fabulous, and I will see you after, I think, do we have a break? I don't have the schedule. Lunch, yay, okay.